Well, looking at it, you all, you don't look as hungover as you probably should be, having been in New Orleans. You know, I got off the elevator yesterday and I noticed there was a big water container. That's cheating. If you're drinking water, you're cheating. That's part of what. But you know, it's an extraordinary time to be here. Last year, we were in Charleston, South Carolina for the spring event. And I came away having the best feeling about that town that I thought I knew well, and I knew it a lot better. And I hope you all will come away from New Orleans feeling the same way about that. What I thought we'd do is let everybody do about 4 or 5 minutes on whatever subject they want. Our assignment is to talk about business and the arts. Anybody got a problem with business and the arts? Okay, that's taken care of. We don't go into anything. But Julia Reed's on the far end, Paul Groves next to her, Bradley Summerall, and Cooper Manning's here. But I want to kind of set this up in a way. New Orleans is a wonderful town and probably the most cosmopolitan town in our nation. I'll give San Francisco a little prop, but for the most part, there ain't no place like New Orleans. I know growing up in North Mississippi, as I did, the Baptists wouldn't let us sin. We had to go out of state to sin. Nobody wanted to go to Arkansas or Tennessee. Good God, Alabama, we didn't want to do that. And I just ran across a clipping from a newspaper in Scott County, Mississippi. We took that thing called, in 1962, in the spring of 1962, we took that thing called a senior trip. And my memory was that 71 of us got on a bus, but according to the article, only 34 got on the bus. And then we were gone for 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, but we were gone for 4 days. We came directly to New Orleans. I saw the Delgado Museum. I saw extraordinary works of art. And it just turned me around. And I come back to New Orleans every chance I get. Both Julia Reed and I have served on the board of the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. And our first speaker today is Bradley Summerall, who's from the little village of Summerall, Mississippi. See, you ain't nobody unless you come from a town that's named after you. It's actually very interesting. It's in the Free State of Jones, and his folks were involved in that craziness up there. You know, they seceded from the Confederacy. How'd that work out, Bradley?
The North came down and said, stop it.
Let me just do this. Y'all got some downtime, and I want you to go to the Ogden Museum of Southern Art. It's over on Camp Street, very close to Lee Circle, or the Empty Plinth Circle, as it's called now. I've left some material out on the deal here. It's something you don't want to miss. It's close to the World War II Museum, and Julia Street, where all the galleries are, is right next to it. So let me get a plug in. But Bradley, if you talk a little bit about art and business and the fact that you're qualified to do what you do because you're an English major who worked at a Waffle House.
I'm an English major that worked at 12 Waffle
Oh,
Now, Bill asked me to talk today, I guess, a little bit about the museum and its role in the community. And, you know, I forgot to turn off my phone.
That's your agent.
Yeah, right.
that's a big funder.
But, you know, I saw the power of art in the community after Hurricane Katrina. And the Ogden Museum of Southern Art was the first arts institution, cultural institution, to open with programming just a few short months after Hurricane Katrina devastated the city. And, you know, I saw people spending their days cleaning up their homes, you know, looking at what they had lost. And then when the museum finally opened, this clean space full of beautiful things, it served as a community center in many ways. And, you know, there was musical programming. Julia was there, and it just became a place of hope in a city that seemed like we had lost so much. Now, the Ogden Museum has continued to grow in its role in the community, and right now we're seeing about 85,000 visitors a year, and about 15,000 of those visitors are kids in educational programs. And you know, we won one of the top awards in the nation for our Summer Teen Docent Program. Just as the Obamas were leaving office, one of the kids from the inner city schools that was one of our Summer Teen Docents was able to accept the award on behalf of the Ogden Museum from Michelle Obama. She was a junior in high school, so I bet she was the most popular senior in her high school the next year. But, you know, the museum continues to play a role. And, you know, Bill asked, you know, why art matters. That's what he originally told me this panel was on, because, yeah, we didn't know about the business side of things until this morning.
I'm not going to force you to address it one way or the other.
But, you know, I think I couldn't have said it better than the opening address, what elegant words you had for why art matters this morning. But, you know, art matters, I think, personally, and I've seen it many, many times as an artist, as a maker. You make sense of the world around you, whether you're a child or you're Bill Dunlap. That's how you make sense of the world. Julie says same.
That's synonymous.
But that's how you make sense of the world around you. And you know, it's proven that people who have extended engagement with the arts are not only smarter people, they're happier people, and they're more successful people. because it, arts enables you to hone your both creative thinking and critical thinking. I think Steve Jobs a couple of years ago said that, a class he took in college on calligraphy influenced his designs on the Macintosh computer. So many years later, so that creative thinking and that critical thinking that you learn through the arts can be part of your success in everyday life. But also in a community, I think the arts institutions and art galleries create a place where we can come together and hash out things, I think, in a safe place. Art is not always about the beautiful picture on the wall or the historical painting. Sometimes it's where we put our grievances out and try to understand the problems that we're facing in the world today. And I think art institutions play that vital role in the community as well. What else should I say, Bill?
That's good. We'll come back to you
Yeah.
because we're going to talk amongst ourselves at some point. I think according to my Mississippi history, my memory, I believe it was 1542, Hernando de Soto died of the fever or wounds inflicted on him by the Chickasaw near Memphis. And his conquistador buddies stuffed his body into an empty log and floated him down the river. I don't know if he made it as far as New Orleans, if New Orleans was even here then, but I can assure you, peckerwoods from North Mississippi have been floating down to this part of the world ever since. And New Orleans wouldn't be what it is without us Mississippi white trash coming in from down. Now that's not to lead up to Julia Reed, mind you, but the best book. But she is from Greenville, Mississippi, and she's the grand matron of something called a Hot Tamale Festival that gathers the third weekend in October every year. And it's happened 3 times now, so it's a huge tradition. We've got to keep doing that. But the best... 7 times. Okay, it seems like 3 to me. But the best book on the post-Katrina era that I've read is House on First Street, her extraordinary memoir about putting your lives back together after that damn storm. Julia Reed's all over the place. She's in Garden and Gun. She's been everywhere. She's done everything. And she's a great, good friend of mine in the arts, and I want to say a word to you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you all for having us. I just want to elaborate a little bit about what Bradley started off saying, and I can even bring it back to business in the arts, which is a new topic that was sprung on us about 15 seconds ago. But anyway,
You can handle it, baby.
but the point is that when we opened the Ogden, which was, as Bradley says, it was, for my many sins at that point, I think I was the chairman of the board of the museum, or about to be, and we opened up. There's a Thursday night. Is it Wednesday or Thursday? My brain.
Thursday.
Thursday night music event at the Ogden every week, and the first week we reopened, we had a musician. The director was paying him out of his pocket because we didn't have any money. Nobody knew where the money was. It was floating away, and but it was an extraordinary amount of people turned up that first night, just like. The first night the restaurants reopened in town was like old home week. I mean, people were so happy to have a place to go and to see people, even if they were eating on paper plates and and the chefs were also washing the dishes and stuff. It was like, it was incredibly exciting time, as heartbreaking as it was, to see everybody rally. It was sort of like Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland, those old movies, like, let's put on a show. And it was sort of like that from the ground up. But it also signaled to the wider world, and this is where the business part comes in, that New Orleans was not just going to curl up in a ball and die. I mean, it's extraordinary to think of now, but if you might remember that Dennis Tastard, who turned out to be yet another sex offender, was at that point, unfortunately, the Speaker of the House, I think, and said, why should we rebuild New Orleans? I mean, that was an actual literal question in the weeks after the storm, and it's breathtaking to even say that now. But that was one of the things on the table. It's like, forget about it. But the fact that the artists and the musicians and everybody rallied, and which has always been the sort of public soul of New Orleans is the arts, sort of signaled to people that we're back and we're not going away and we're going to be open for business. And I remember. There's a lot of alcohol being consumed in those early days post-Katrina for obvious reasons. It was real hot, for one thing. And Walter Isaacson, who I think is going to be speaking to you guys a little bit later, and I ended up the night that a restaurant, Upper Line, reopened. And like I said, every time a restaurant reopened, it was a big signal that, we're coming back. And so we're sitting in Upper Line drinking all the whiskey that was still left in the restaurant. And which was enough to say, I know, let's have a fundraiser. And which means that Walter's like, I'll get all the people to give the money, but you have to put it on. So we did, and it was great because we had, it benefited the three of us, we got, and Wynton Marsalis was going to co-host it with us. So Wynton was, his cause was Higher Ground, the Musicians Fund that helped musicians relocate back to New Orleans. I threw my third into the Ogden, and Walter gave his third to the PRC, the Preservation Resource Committee here that renovates old houses and has been vital in the preservation of historic buildings here, which is also our heart and soul. So, but we got people from all over the country to come here because people still thought, I mean, this was in January, the flood was in September. People still thought nationwide, I mean, I go to New York and people say, is the water still there? I'm like, no, it drained like about a week later. People thought we were still underwater, so you had to signal that we were still there, but people came down and we had the Mardi Gras Indians dancing around, and we had a big reception at the Ogden, and we had a bunch of brass bands come and play, and Ellis Marsalis played at this dinner that we had. It was like a 3-day celebration of everybody we could just sort of prop up and drag out. And people from all over the country were just so incredibly impressed. And we got the hotels filled up and the restaurants filled up, and it was sort of the sign finally in the beginning of 2018 that we were back in business. And the other thing that happened almost concurrently was Bill's and mine and Bradley's good friend John Alexander, who's a great artist who shows here at the Arthur Roger Gallery. He had a show not long after that, and he was terrified because it's like, who's going to come and buy paintings that cost $50,000 to $100,000 in this environment? Is it going to be in bad taste or kind of crazy if nobody going to buy these paintings, whatever? But people again from all over the country came down and signaled that we want to do business in New Orleans. So I would venture that the arts and the restaurateurs really helped New Orleans get back on its feet and certainly show the public that we were back at it. And since then, I think I don't think I'm wrong, and I think Bradley would agree with me that the arts in New Orleans has been revitalized. I mean, restaurant community. I mean, like, it's not like we didn't have a whole lot of restaurants before Katrina. We had something like almost twice as many restaurants and bars as we did before Katrina. It kind of kicked us in the ass and got us new energy across the board.
And it also, excuse me, after Hurricane Katrina also, I think one of the driving forces for a healthy arts community was the new triennial that was started by Dan Cameron, Prospect. It started as a biennial, it's now a triennial, and it's a symbol of a real thriving arts community. And there was a major boost in the arm of new artists, people that came to New Orleans just to help after Hurricane Katrina, fell in love with the city and stayed. And I think one of the signs that we have a really healthy economy in New Orleans right now, as well as a healthy arts community, is the public art that's happening all over the city. The Ogden's involved with a program called the Poitras Corridor exhibition, which is really the main artery of business and finance, Poitras Avenue in New Orleans, Poitras Street, I'm sorry. And so we've placed a rotating public art on Poitras now, and it's become a really highly successful arts exhibition, as well as a symbol that the community, that New Orleans is healthy and happy and successful.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing to that too, because I think you're right that before Katrina, New Orleans was really rested on its laurels, which were pretty weak and pitiful on those laurel branches. I mean, you had not a very healthy economy. I mean, it was almost entirely a service economy. And all of my friends who had people, kids college age, knew that those kids were going to go to college and never come back home. They were never going to see them back in New Orleans again. Now you've got this influx of young people because they did come down to volunteer for all these good causes, for everything from food charities to arts charities to on and on. They came down, Teach for America. We have the second largest Teach for America presence in the country after New York. So you have all of those young people coming in, and they decided to stay because they saw finally a community back in flux and back welcoming a whole wider range of folks than were here before. You had an economy that was stagnant. You had a social life based on Mardi Gras balls and who was going to be queen of whatever. It was a pretty old school, not entirely welcoming place in the days leading up to Katrina, I would say. Don't you think? I mean, it was...
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, Cooper grew up here. He would know better than I do. But
Yeah, I was just remembering that, you said that thing about when restaurants were open. Julia Reed and I went to Petite Grocery not long after the storm and ran into your mother and father. And Olivia Manning came up to me and said, "Oh, we're still in Oxford. We're just visiting our house." I didn't mean for this to be about the storm, but it still looms large. It looms very, very large.
Well, it made a huge, it had a huge impact. I think that New Orleans is it's, you find your silver linings wherever you can. And I don't think anybody that lost a loved one in the storm would think it was the greatest thing that ever happened to the city, but it was, in a way, a really good wake-up call. You realize you get the government you deserve, and we did. We had a really dysfunctional government because you had a totally disengaged populace. And now you got a whole lot of better civic activity. You've got people sort of doing it for themselves. You've got a revitalized arts community. You've got a revitalized restaurant community. It used to just be sort of all Creole food. Now you've got a restaurant scene that reflects the melting pot that's New Orleans. It's an entirely different place than the place I first came to cover an election, by the way, I came as a journalist and kind of got sucked into the vortex that is New Orleans and kept sort of getting bigger and better apartments until I finally stayed here for good. But to cover the election between Edwin Edwards, who was our, really corrupt governor, and David Duke, the Klansman. Not a really good choice. The bumper sticker was literally, "Vote for the crook, that'd be Edwards." It's important because, so that's where we were in '91 when I came down here, and I thought, God, I'm glad I don't pay taxes in this town. And now, like an idiot, I do.
But Cooper Manning's a lifelong New Orleans. His mother and father are from the Delta and the Hill Country where I'm from, respectively. He went to the Newman School, which was founded as a school for Jewish orphans. Oy vey, as we say in Mississippi. Then he went to Ole Miss, graduated up there, and Cooper's been in business ever since. Now, Cooper, rumor has it that you've made more money than both your brothers and your father put together. Is that the truth?
I'm glad you're still spreading rumors. It's funny, Julie talked about Katrina. I remember when we evacuated New Orleans Saturday night, 2 little babies and a pregnant wife, and we're not uncommon to get out of town when a storm's coming. I just like to leave early. It was always kind of like a snow day or a vacation. So we drove up to Oxford on a typical Saturday, and I met you, and I was looking at my bio under this, and it says businessman art collector. That really is
that's
several Bill Dunlap pieces. That's really the extent of my.
When did you buy that piece of art, Cooper?
I own a lot of Bill Dunlap art, so therefore I finally got a panel spot. So actually, I'm going to segue. I'm having flashbacks of being on a panel. In Oxford about 15 years ago, and I guess they felt sorry for me. I was up there on a Friday. They said, hey, they were having a business panel. We're having, some really prominent alums come up. We have the number 2 at FedEx. We have this gentleman from NASA. Some guy invented the credit card strip, and then I was 28 with a, personal wealth of $4. I was on this panel. So all these, just like this, imagine y'all are all juniors and seniors kind of looking for some advice and wisdom of these alums, and I don't say anything for probably 45 minutes of the whole thing. And then finally, I was kind of getting bored just listening to these people talk about themselves, and I said, the question was, when did you know you had made it? And so I'm 28, I know I have, and so the lady said, I go, actually, would you mind if I go? And she was kind of perturbed, and I said, when I was a freshman at Ole Miss, I was on the football team. 2-a-days were kind of wrapping up, and the coach gave us a night off. Said, be home at midnight. So I grabbed a couple of linemen, freshmen, we've been there sweating it out together, went downtown to a little watering hole and drank a few pitchers of beer, got in my car, 11:30, heading back to make curfew, and had a few pops. And I pull up to the red light, and a police officer is behind me and just kind of turns on the lights. So I'm already rehearsing the conversation I'm going to have with my dad, from the jail cell. and right then, I get school kind of starting to crank up. The SAE house, they always had a hearse they kept just in case they needed one. And so a hearse, a big white hearse. It was beautiful. Anyway, this hearse pulls up, goes right by me. I'm right here. Hearse pulls up, stops in the middle of the street, and 4 butts just come out and moon me. I go, okay. Well, the police officer saw it. He went around me, arrested them. I made it home, and that's when I knew I'd made it. I'm not sure that's what they were looking for, but that's all I gave. I was pretty popular with the juniors and seniors after the panel was over. So I'll be giving autographs over there after.
Ole Miss by damn.
Right. No, I love art. I remember, it's funny, things come back. When you're here, I think about my time in Mississippi, but the casino opened my sophomore year, and I went to the casino first time and won a couple $100, and instead of blowing it on beer or something stupid, I bought my first piece of art. It was mine. I saw it at the City Grocery one night, and it still hangs in my house today.
Testify.
Yeah, it's true. And so, and even today, I started a college town hotel platform called Graduate Hotels in great college towns like Oxford and Athens and Charlottesville and University of Michigan and Berkeley. And art is such a huge component of our decor and design, and we stay local and we make it weird. In Berkeley, we have bong lamps that hang. That doesn't work in Oxford. In Oxford, we have pink floors. As they say in Mississippi, the bigger the hair, the smaller the town. So it's just been a huge, it's been a huge part of my life. And there's nothing I like more than getting in the convertible and having a few drinks and going down Magazine Street and buying art. All we need now is more wall space.
Build a wing.
Build a wing. That's right.
We know this whole business of art and business. Paul Groves, one of the most extraordinary people. I had to go to California to meet him, but he's from here. He grew up he's from Lake Charles and went to LSU and then to Juilliard. You don't think of one without the other, do you? I mean, LSU and Juilliard, they all kind of the same. But this gentleman is running an extraordinary international career as a tenor, Metropolitan Opera tenor, from Covington, Louisiana, and you can do that now. And Paul, you want to just fill in some blanks? So you're not from Mississippi, are you?
No, I'm not.
No, okay. All right.
But I thank God for Mississippi every day, or Louisiana would be last in everything. We're second to last.
Don't forget about Arkansas.
Yes. Oh yeah. Maybe they're last now. So I haven't met most of you, so I'll give you a little background, because I get the question a lot: how did a fishing and hunting kid from the bayous, really born on the bayou in Lake Charles, Louisiana, become an opera singer? And it's because music was in my family already. My father was dean of the music department at McNeese State University in Lake Charles, Louisiana. My mother was a singer. My brother was smart. He went into the oil business. But I didn't want to go to the same university as my father was dean of the music department, which caused quite a bit of problems in my family for the first couple of months. But then my dad came around. So I went to Louisiana State University, and I was in conducting, because that's all I knew. My father was a conductor. I always tell people, I tried every single instrument, and then I finally realized you had to practice the least to be a singer. So I became a singer. But I was 19 or so at Louisiana State University, and they were doing an opera, and I decided, well, I'll audition for the opera chorus. So I found out what opera they were doing, and I learned the aria. It was Così fan tutte. It's a Mozart opera. And I could sing it, no problem. Everyone in my family sang, and at that time I was more into Robert Plant than Pavarotti, but I went in and I sang it for the vocal faculty, and it just so happened that Martina Arroyo, the great Metropolitan Opera soprano, came to teach at Louisiana State University that same semester. So I sang for the voice faculty, and after I finished, she said, "Mr. Groves, may I see you outside, please?" So I went outside with her, and she talked me into changing my major and trying to be an opera singer. So after that, I finished my undergraduate there. I got right into Juilliard. I was there for a couple of years, and then I went straight into the Metropolitan Opera Young Artist Program. And I was inspired. It was wonderful in New York City to be across the street from the Met and be able to go every other night and see Pavarotti or Domingo or Morella Freni. And later in life, after I started at the Met, those people became my friends and my mentors. And the power of the human voice is the reason that we all love this. We all love all singing, jazz, gospel, pop music, any of that. We get goosebumps from that. And one of the things I've seen since I've had a 30-year career singing all over the world is that we're losing that. We're not losing the voices, but we're losing why we all fell in love with this art form. with classical music. It's about the music. I get goosebumps just talking about it because I remember the first time I was sitting at the Metropolitan Opera and Luciano Pavarotti came out and started singing. I was thrilled beyond belief. I couldn't sleep for 2 or 3 days. And I said, that's going to be me. I'm not going to be quite that heavy, but that's going to be me. So, and I see it changing, but I see it changing in a way that we're focusing on what goes on behind the singers and what happens with the stage and lighting, which are all great, but they're all there. They were originally intended to enhance the singing performance. So that's why when you go to a concert, and I do a lot of concerts where I just come out in a tuxedo and we do concert operas and we do concerts, of course there are many symphonies and orchestral works for singers, that you really don't miss any of that stuff. As long as you have real quality singers and quality performers, I don't really miss any of the stuff going on around them. So I'm starting a new crusade after the, last time I was just at the Met for 9 shows in December and January. And I'm trying to get all of my singing friends, to start this crusade of let's bring it back to the basics. It's all about the music, and that's what inspired all of us, and it's still what inspires the young people that come to see the performances. So if you ask a 15-year-old, because a lot of times we have, for the dress rehearsal, it's all full of high school students, which is wonderful. We do it here at the New Orleans Opera also. And if you ask the 15-year-olds afterwards, what was your favorite part about it? They all say, this person singing, or that person singing, or none of them say the costume, or the lighting, or any of that kind of stuff. Even though it's beautiful to look at and we have amazing stuff now, the reason why we all love the art form and any kind of music is just the music itself.
Let me point out that Paul will sing at dinner tonight. It's a little early for anybody to sing in the morning, but he's going to put his taste where his mouth is tonight at dinner tonight. I was thinking about this too, what everybody said. I'm a senior member of this panel, and in my own situation, to be autobiographical, I came out of Ole Miss in 1969 like a feral animal with an MFA. I taught at the University of North Carolina's Appalachian State campus, and John Alexander, about my age, James Searles, all these artists that we taught for a while. And I missed certain things about teaching, but certainly not the faculty meetings. But then we stepped out into the marketplace, and it received us. And I think that's happened all the way around. It takes a lot of money to put on a Metropolitan Opera production.
Yes,
it takes a lot of money to run a museum. It takes a lot of money to be a collector. But you need a little bit more money. But my point is, I think generationally, as the American society, we've come of age. We support our artists. When you think about the guys in the 50s, the abstract expressionists, Jackson Pollock, de Kooning, they got stipends from Betty Parson on a monthly basis to live. And of course, now their work's just priceless. But that's the way it is. Dying is a good career move in the arts. At least hey, it worked for Elvis, didn't it? I mean, come on. But anyway, if y'all want to address that a little bit, I think as a society we've come of age. We've talked about New Orleans specifically, but when I saw the old Delgado Museum, which is now the Museum of Modern Art in 1962, that literally changed my life. It wasn't Pavarotti, but it was pretty damn good. All those great Baroque paintings they've got out there, things.
I think about the story that Benny Andrews told. Benny is an artist that is heavily represented in our collection at the Ogden Museum, and he was also kind of one of the founding visionaries of the museum itself. But he wasn't allowed to go to museums, not that there was much in Georgia where he came from, but wasn't allowed to go to museums. He wasn't allowed to go to the university there because of the color of his skin, so he went to Korea instead, and with the GI Bill was able to go to the School of the Arts Institute of Chicago. And in Chicago, he walked into a museum for the first time and saw a masterwork hanging on the wall and wept, and it changed his life. And from that point on, he knew that he wanted to hang his work on museum walls, and he changed not only himself, but the fabric of the United States and the museum world, and fought for inclusion and diversity in the museum world. So just that one art experience sometimes, seeing that masterwork for the first time, or hearing that opera singer for the first time can change your life forever.
I mean, I grew up in Greenville, Mississippi, which is, we like to think we're extremely cosmopolitan up in the Mississippi Delta, but we did not, there are no art museums in Greenville, there's not an opera, but what's important even in smaller towns like that, I think, and I think it's super important to keep that going, is we had a small symphony. We had a little. It's called the Little Theater, and that's where I saw. I mean, I wouldn't know anything about Broadway if I hadn't grown up in Greenville, because I saw every production, great production of the time, put on there with local talent that was, you know, and some of those people went off to have great careers outside of Greenville, but, you know, that's where I saw South Pacific, and where I saw The King and I, and Kiss Me Kate, and racier stuff than that, and small art shows, you know, of local artists, and you know, little festivals and stuff. And I think that's so important to have at a local level, where you're not going to have a major museum experience. The Met, I mean, we'd have tenors like you, and people come to our symphony. We had a kind of a renegade symphony director for a while who slipped John Prine when he first started his career. I don't know if you guys know John Prine, but he's a great folk rock singer, and the time he had a hit song about a junkie that came back from Vietnam, and all these old ladies came to the symphony thinking that, you know, John Prine must be some pianist or cellist or tenor or something on the program, and here comes John Prine out in his blue jeans. So, and the entire Baptist population of Greenville got up en masse when he sang the line, "Jesus Christ died for nothing, I suppose." Boom! Everybody got up, but which was great for the rest of us. We had a very intimate show. But, you know, there were people like that came to town, and it did change people's lives. But more than that, you learn how to celebrate our own arts. I mean, you know, the Delta is the hotbed of the blues. When I came back from Fred Starr's great party last night, I was thrilled to find out on my local PBS station that there was a live concert of the Rolling Stones performing Sticky Fingers, the album in its entirety, which is like, I was rocking out in my bedroom at midnight last night. But speaking of the power of voices.
Was a zipper on the front?
Yeah, that was it. And,
Warhol cover it.
and there's
Warhol.
Mick Jagger, who's about 150 years old, talking about singing. Oh, it's like the aerobic capacity of a 12-year-old jumping all around the stage. It was awesome. But, you know, they were singing B.B. King covers and all these blues singers from right down the road from where I grew up. And so I was lucky enough to grow up with that, too. And now, you know, we see that celebrated everywhere. I just think we need to keep in mind that you don't have to be from Chicago or New York or New Orleans even to have a life-changing experience in the arts. It's so important to support local arts councils, local symphonies, local everything. Because I had such a rich experience growing up, and it was all because of those little folks putting on a show.
Well, you know, the elephant in the room, of course, is the writers. The American South has produced all these writers, these William Faulkners, Eudora Welty's, Richard Wrights, and it goes on and on. It takes a little bit more to do. Mr. Faulkner said that all a writer needed to do his work was paper and pencil and a little money for alcohol and tobacco. The intrinsic cost of making art, a little bit more than that. Putting on a metropolitan show, having a museum otherwise. But I think it might be a good time to open this up to questions. Anybody got any questions? Yeah, we got questions. Anybody got any answers? There's an answer.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
My question is, I'm in my early 70s, and I love to go to the theater because I'm young compared to my audience. So my question is, how do you get younger people interested in the arts when the schools are no longer emphasizing the arts? They just can't afford it.
Well,
Everybody
that's
get
where
that
I think the local arts councils that I was talking about comes in. I mean, I spend a lot of time in my hometown, and as Bill said, I put on something called the Delta Hot Tamale Festival, which y'all should all come to the third weekend in October. But those local arts councils step in and take the place of the public schools that don't have any money, especially in a place like Greenville, Mississippi. I mean, the well is dry. So you donate to things like that because they go into the schools and they do programs at the Ogden. Bradley can address the programs at the Ogden that fill the void for, you know, arts programs in the schools here. I mean, that's you find a way around. I mean, if you expect the public schools to do anything, you're dreaming. But so you find a way around that, and you find organizations that support that and augment that, and there are a lot of them out there, and it's more important than ever because of what you say. I mean, like to expose these kids to theater and to art and to writing programs, all kind of stuff. But there's so many things that you can do to fill the void. And I think, Bradley, you should talk about the program at the Ogden.
Well, one of the programs we have at the Ogden, because it's no secret that New Orleans public schools were in serious trouble prior to Katrina and have not gotten that much better afterwards. There's still many schools with no arts programs whatsoever, and the Ogden seeks to kind of fill that role in some of the public schools. We have a program called Artisan Sense of Place, And we place artists in residence in the public schools for up to a month and a half to build out a project and work with the kids. And then we hang that project on the walls of the Ogden Museum. So not only are we, filling a need in the public schools, but we're engaging a community that maybe had never walked into a museum when the parents come in to see the kids work on the wall, and we're engaging, we're fulfilling our mission in that way. We often try to, if we can, place an artist from that neighborhood, an artist that's actually out there making it in the world that came from Central City or whatever part of New Orleans that the program is happening in that month. And so the kids can see that they too could have a career maybe in the arts. And if not, at least they can see their work on the wall hanging next to Masterworks by Benny Andrews, say, or William Dunlap for that matter.
Well, Benny Andrews left us way too soon, and Bradley's, he was working on a series. Benny's racial makeup was Choctaw, European, and African. And he was working on a series about all three of those, bringing those together. And boy, would that have ever been timely with the conversation that's going on right now. I miss him a lot. I've been hearing about the epiphanies that we've all had. Anybody else got a question out there? Yes, ma'am.
In regards to artists and disasters, was there any, in the wake of Katrina, were there any artists that rose that we should know about?
Oh God,
Repeat the question.
She asked, are there any artists that rose in the wake of Katrina that we should know about? And the list is just too long to go. One of the artists that I think Katrina had a profound effect upon and created a body of work that is really important is an artist that has not returned yet to New Orleans. He's still out in Santa Fe, where he landed after Hurricane Katrina, and his name is Michael Meads. And after Hurricane Katrina, he was looking at pushing his craft and just dealing with what had just happened. He lost over 50% of his life's work in the storm, and they was financially and mentally broken. And so he went out to Santa Fe just to kind of heal and deal with this. And luckily, his husband won the lottery, so they were allowed to. He was allowed to.
So
do
that's
this.
what it takes.
Yeah. So,
Marywell is another one. Marywell.
He started working on these 10-foot by 16-foot graphite drawings that are just, they're operas. He considers them operas. They're like, the libretto of a much larger story and kind of the crescendo of a narrative that's happening and they're just graphite 10-foot by 16-foot, some of them.
Gorgeous.
Graphite drawings, and they're just absolutely stunning.
And other artists, talk about Lonnie Holly a little bit. I mean, there were some artists that had been sort of celebrated beforehand, and then they came to Katrina and used and found all these found objects and made.
Well, I'm still finding things that Lonnie left behind in his last visit because he's like Benny Andrews used to call his father, who was a self-taught artist, a walking paintbrush, and Lonnie Holly's kind of a walking sculptor. He can't sit still. He's always twisting something together, making something. But in the wake of Katrina, he was kind of in heaven with materials because there was material everywhere on the streets as they were cleaning out the houses, and he would just turn this trash into a beautiful object. And like I said, I'm still finding things tucked away in the back of our auxiliary spaces in the Ogden where Lonnie had made some beautiful sculpture that we.
It's funny you'd bring up Lonnie Holly. He's from Birmingham originally. And my wife, Linda Burgess, introduced me to him. She was teaching at Birmingham Southern. We went out by the airport, and Lonnie was getting this, there's still a little bit of an iron casting industry now. They get this non-ferrous casting deal, get this sandstone and carve them up. We've got a wonderful collection of his things. And Lonnie is a found object artist, and he's illiterate, but he's one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And I knew he had made it when he came up to me at the Smithsonian in Washington. He said, "Bill, I need to talk to you about a little funding." You didn't learn that word, man. Doug Holliday founded Path North, and once again, Path North has gone south. It's never going to go north. This meeting will never be in Bangor, Maine. But he's got a thing or two he wants to say, and I want to let him do that.
Okay. Hey, thanks, guys, for and we look forward to you tonight.
Yeah.
And I hope the rest of you, if you want to come, that would be great. So what we do in Path North a lot of times is ask questions. I think we're always looking for the answer, but really, isn't it a better activity to try to find what is the right question to ask? So I think Barry was starting to get at this. about what do we need, what's the question we need to ask in our communities to kind of change the narrative about the importance of art. When you start looking at what has happened with kids, the kids that have made it out of the toughest schools, a lot of time they point to, you know, I picked up a musical instrument in the 5th grade, or there was something that transformed their thinking. I'd like you to turn to your table for a minute and just, I know this is a new thought, but think about 1 or 2 questions that you should ask your community, yourself, the world, God, whatever, about how the arts could be transformational in your sphere of influence. What is the right question to ask? We always kind of default to the answer. And what I mean, you know, you take Cooper, I love what you're doing with the art, the original art. Once you hear what he's doing, it's original art that's so striking. You go in there. How many times have we gone to places where we're just numb to these kind of fake paintings that have just been mass produced? But you could change, a hotel could do that, right? They could go to local artists and say, we want to populate all the walls with awesome local art. So what, you asked the right question. And the thing is for us, where could we in our workplaces and bring a whole different discussion? Does that make sense? What is the right question? So let's just take 5 minutes around your table, okay? And this might totally bomb, but we always try things. So just turn to your table and say, what's the right 1 or 2 questions that could really help us, if we really believe the arts are important, really move that conversation forward? But you're having far too much meaningful conversation here. Okay, just a question. Okay, what's the right question to ask about this subject, about the arts and how this is meant to improve us, our communities? And who has the right question, they think? Or a couple questions? Anybody? This table have a question? No question. Okay, over here. What's the right question? Randy, you do?
Practice is over before practice starts.
Go ahead, Randy.
How do you address a guy like me who can't draw a stick figure, can't play a stereo, and I live in contracts all day long, and so I don't really have the appreciation for the value that art brings. We had a guy live with us for a year who's actually an artist, and as I was inspired by his art, I'm thinking, man, this really moves me. So I began to appreciate the art. So the question is, how do you address a guy like me who doesn't really have the appreciation in business all day long? How do you make me understand the value of art?
Okay, so you hear the question Randy's asking? Here's a guy very successful, what? Oh, okay, very successful in business and in life, and he knows the arts are really valuable, but how does he get unstuck?
I would like to agree with what he said. I'm the same box person. I'm not creative, but you would not be successful if you weren't creative, because you have had to problem solve up to your success. And it might not be able to be a stick figure or an artist, but creativity is developed by good parenting, good schooling, and creativity, no matter whether it takes this form or problem-solving form, to me is equally as important.
Okay, creativity, really important.
Patty's got a great idea.
Hello, Patty.
Hi, Doug. Well, I don't know exactly how this translates to the question, except perhaps why don't we do more of this? What I had said is that we've had some limited success in Charleston. I have a real estate company, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina, so it's a small community relative to many of yours. But one of the things we've done, instead of just giving money to the symphony or money to the Children's Museum or whatever, is we've tied it to, we'll do this if you will take a program out to the children. Not necessarily, you know, what the Children's Museum wanted to do, for example, is they said, well, we'll give them free, you know, I said, yeah, but they can't afford to drive to downtown Charleston and park. So that they would take an outreach program to reach schools and children out in the community. And I guess what this morning's conversation prompted in my mind is, why haven't we done more of that? You know, it just kind of brought it back to the forefront. But it's been relatively successful, at least in our community.
Okay, Christina, so one of the things I'd say that we need to think about, I think particularly successful linear thinkers in business are afraid that they're going to get the answer wrong. And I would say, you know, there are a lot of painters in my family, and I think, why don't you take an art course? Why don't you try some stuff and stop judging that it's not going to be good enough? And I think that's one of our problems, is it gets us stuck. Christina, a well-known artist and business leader.
I was just going to make a simple comment that I think recognizing the power of art is in how it connects with you. And so that's through feeling or however it is you choose to connect to it. I myself am far from an artist, but I think maybe what would be helpful for those of us who are not artists in the room is for artists, and maybe this goes up to the panel and those who work with artists, to potentially help draw the direct parallel to how much art is around us every day. Our iPhones, our computers, those are all works of art in many ways because someone had to creatively think outside of the box to put that together. And so I think perhaps it's just the fact that, you know, unintentionally we don't realize how much art is impacting it every single day.
Okay. I'd say also what's valued as success now has very little to do with the arts and this way of thinking. It used to be. You had people that really thought differently. If you read in 1888, Andrew Carnegie wrote a letter to himself, and it's extraordinary the way he thought about ideas. He said, he never did this, but he did write in this letter to himself as a 34-year-old man, I want to go spend time around the world of ideas and create things. Mary Bush.
Before Barry asked his question, I had the very same question. So I've been sitting here thinking also about people not knowing each other, and especially kids. So the question that I've come up with is, how can we get kids who are in those horrible inner city public schools to express themselves through art, and then kids who are in the suburban, wealthier schools to express themselves through art, and then do an exchange where they talk about their pieces, get to know each other, and get to understand each other's lives.
Wow.
Because I think that'll go a long way
Mary Bush
towards...
for president. That's a great idea. Jim Toms, a failed Brown University grad.
You know, Brown just got so much grief. I was at the Chamber of Commerce meetings last week, and we got slaughtered on the free speech thing, so anyway. Sorry. An idea, you know, Path North moment. A couple weeks ago, we live in San Diego and Phoenix, and we were in this wonderful art gallery, and it was the Artist Gallery. And we hung out with him for an hour and a half, just talking and looking at his art. And we bought a small piece, and I wanted to buy a bigger piece, but Melinda's got a new shotgun. We didn't really all fun stuff, but priorities, right? But a thought occurred to me, we're all business owners, and it built on your point of relationships. We tend to see art as something we support through a foundation or a museum. But what if we all have office space? What if we all decided to get to know an artist in our community and commit to buying X dollars of their art each year? You put up in your office, but you become a foundation customer for them. It's some income, and maybe you commit to $20,000 a year or $30,000 a year purchase of their art through your company. You're putting up, your company gets behind it, and it's some baseline income, and maybe it pays for their studio. And the guy joked with us, I love his art. He does these incredible landscapes. They're kind of psychedelic. You'd like it. I think he like takes mushrooms before he paints, because it's amazing. It's like Sedona, but with any color. But the idea is you get to know the artist, you invest and you build that relationship. But he kind of joked with us, hey, if you buy that painting, I'll give you a discount, make my rent this month for my studio. I mean, but what if he knew that he had a partner and somebody could talk to that gets to know him, supports the work, and provides some financial income? Just an idea.
Let me build before we close on that idea. I was looking at the Medicis and some of these great patron families and what they did for the arts, and we'll have Walter Isaacson tonight, who did this great book on Da Vinci. But patrons were really important in that period and all the great art that was created. So I said, in my own little way, I'm going to set up a Medici fund. So I looked around for a couple artists. I found this guy that was a Stanford graduate. He was in New York, a Shakespearean actor. And then I had another guy who was a hip-hop artist, who sadly has passed. And I said to both of them, I said, instead of washing dishes at night, I'm going to give you a little stipend for a year. Just create music. I never like or art, whatever you do, act or in this guy's case, create hip-hop music. And so they're a little like, what's the angle here? What do you want for this? I said, there's two things I want. Number one, I never want to report because I believe in you and I think your talent, this is your passion. Number two, if you are successful, you have to find another person like you and give them wings to do it. That's the question I ask. Why aren't we doing that today? And it led to these two guys. One of them made it really big, this African-American guy. Sadly, he passed a couple years ago. Last but not least, because we have to turn this back to Eddie.
I think I agree with the sentiments in here, and we had a very similar conversation at our table. And the actual question we came up with was how do we expand the distribution channel for art and make it more accessible to the general public beyond the museums, the playhouses, the opera houses, et cetera. And I think that's the real crux of what I'm hearing in this room is how do we expand that distribution channel?
Great idea. You know, you're going to hear a lot about different themes of how to bring meaning in your life, but one I would say, to make we can get overwhelmed with the problems and the solutions, but I think the starting point is always us. So if we want to figure out how the arts work in our community, why don't you and I decide, you know what, I used to play the piano, I think I'll try it again. You know, Bob, give up. You'll never make it. No, he's a great pianist, But something, whatever it is, and say, I'm going to take the risk. Nobody's going to grade me. I just want to be out there. Okay, so I'll turn it back to Eddie. We've got a great day in store, and
Please another thank you to our panel. They've all stepped
And thank you to you by contributing with those questions. I could just see a lot of heads nodding and a lot of those thoughts resonating. I had an illustrious group in the back with the Senefs and Bob Franklin, Bob Woody, and Fatima. And just some of these really struck me. If you are a little bit like me and you can't help but want to figure out the ROI to everything, like one of the things that we're doing in Orlando, we finally, our city has had an opera, a ballet, and all these wonderful artistic expressions without a real, true performing arts center. We finally have built a fantastic world-class performing arts center thanks to many families like the Senefs. And one of the things they started doing is bringing in high school students from all the schools in the area and starting to measure the impact of their experience with the arts and the outcome of that on life. But some of the other questions I thought were fascinating was how can art help a divided nation? What's the relationship between art and ethics? And Fatima had the fantastic thought that in a place like Afghanistan, how do we get people educated enough to not only want to appreciate the arts and enjoy them, but are there ways that it can be used to really provide people the kind of therapy to bring healing even through traumatic experiences that they're experiencing there. And she's seen that in different ways firsthand. The thought that we should dive into these unknowns, not by only seeking out the answers, but as Doug said it, by just trying to find the right questions. Questions that illuminate and questions that honestly bring us together. It's often our answers that divide us the most, but the questions that can actually bring us together even in unknowns. We want to give you enough time to kind of ask questions as you go on a fantastic professionally guided tour through the French Quarter. And you'll have about 50 minutes to get ready if you want to change shoes or put something comfortable to do that. We're going to transition to that now. Keep the eyes of your heart open today and over the rest of our time together. Collect some of these questions that bubble up in your heart and that you hear other people ask. Sometimes this may be the best takeaway from your time at Path North, not the answers that you think might prescribe a solution. So we're going to break now, and from here, we want you to take a moment to get something comfortable to wear if you need to change your shoes, or if you want to grab a shawl or anything before going on the walk. Please do take advantage of that. We'll be back at 12:45 for the opening session. Please know that you can enjoy any of the restaurants here nearby after the tour. Feel free to wander around town. Just be back for that 12:45 session when we reconvene at the other end of the hallway. Thank you so much. See you then.